I'm Nicole Shanahan, Bobby Kennedy's running mate. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public.
I want to serve the people, not big corporations.
Let's talk about ancestors.
People always ask me, well, what does federal recognition do for you? What does all that mean for your people?
It's missing a very key and important component of what makes the Bay Area special, which is an understanding of these incredible natural systems.
So they were trying to copy and paste what they did on the East Coast over here on the West Coast, but then gold was found.
How do we connect with our natural environment and synchronize with it so that it can continue to support us?
All we're asking is to be treated like every other tribe.
I haven't seen a fair primary in the last 10 years.
Yes.
It's been a while.
It has.
Charlene. Thank you so much for coming today. Thank you again also for endorsing our campaign. It was such a powerful moment watching you on stage with your tribal community members. And you are a member of the Muwekma Ohlone Tribe. And my understanding is that the tribe has been here in the Bay Area for over 10,000 years.
Yes, that's correct.
That's amazing.
It is. And we're still here today. You know, that's what the most amazing part of all this is that even with this big city around us, you know, these big cities, because my people came from the different villages around the Bay Area. From the east, from the peninsula all the way, you know, really around Santa Cruz to the East Bay. So it truly is amazing that we're here today together, you know, surviving everything we face, you know. I say it's special because right now we're at a point where we need to do more to make sure that we keep the first peoples of these lands that have been here 10,000 years, still here, keep them here in their homeland. Because we're going to erase another nation, another First Nations out of the area. And we're struggling, we're fighting more than ever, because I grew up fighting for the same issues that my grandmother, my mother, her mother before her grandparents, on our ancestors, you know, protecting our ancestral burial sites and sovereignty issues. And I say, because of first contact, this land was so valuable, you know, they don't want Indians here. So I think we're at a point where, because of the cost of living, is really pushing us out, the young people. And today I'm really fighting hard to keep us here, because it is special. And I think the community needs to understand that. This is a special place because there is a tribal nation still here.
The Bay Area is such a diverse region. We have microclimates, we have incredibly complex wetlands. We have a huge bay here. And you know, it's always been known as this gold rush town as well, because there is such richness to this land, from natural resources, fishing, the soil is incredible. And one of the things that always strikes me about the Bay Area is that it's been so built up, because it has been generation after generation, this gold rush town. You know, first it was actually gold. Then there was all of this industry. And then we had the construction of one of the largest ports in the country,
Right.
the Port of Oakland. And then tech came in. What has been the experience being, you know, dozens of generations in listening to your ancestral stories, what is the connection to the land that we're all missing as people who are here because of one gold rush or another generation's gold rush? I mean, that's why the Bay Area has become so populated, is because, every generation there's more and more people that just flood into the Bay Area looking for opportunity. And even in my lifetime, I grew up in Oakland in the 80s and 90s. And even in my lifetime, I've seen the Bay Area go through this huge boom. Neighborhoods just expanding out and out further into these gorgeous golden mountains and hills and foothills. What do you think it is intrinsically about this place from your ancestral understanding? What are the stories of this place?
Well, I think to answer your first question, what are we missing? I think today's society is missing that natural beauty that we once had, the natural beauty that my ancestors witnessed before contact. I mean, we had, like you said, these marshlands that, had these natural ecological systems, that fed different environments that we lived in. And we moved around this area, never left the area because it was so bountiful, but there was a reciprocity happening. And that's what we're missing today, is how are we giving back to nature? And, and we're not, because we're so consumed with, our electronics. You talk about the tech industry. If you look at our society, our children are, at least I could speak for myself, right? My own children, they're stuck on their phones or their iPads. And it's not like how we grew up, in the 80s and 90s, being outside, enjoying nature, camping out and, seeing deer and elk and sometimes wild bears, So we're missing that natural connection to Mother Earth. And my ancestors understood that there needed to be a reciprocity going, we take, but we're also giving back. And today we need to figure out, how do we do that? I think like the state parks are starting to reconsider that. How do we need to bring the indigenous communities back to the table so they can teach us how to manage the lands around us. We want to keep them beautiful. I mean, I think in the 50s and 60s with the Smokey the Bear, they didn't want fires going on. But now those fires, they actually, they meant something, right? There was a reason why we did those cultural burns.
Controlled burns.
Controlled burns.
Yeah.
Well, for us, it's cultural burns because there's a spiritual connection. There's a reason why we do them, either for ceremony or to reactivate natural resources that we need to revitalize or make regalia, or for medicine, or, for spiritual sense of those practices.
It's interesting you say that. I actually went to a meeting of Californian scientists trying to figure out how to reduce fire exposure and risk. And there was one scientist in the room that had laid out, with the help of the indigenous community, centers for controlled burns. And he said, if we spend, it was about $500 million on controlled burns, we would eliminate 100% of fire risk in California forests and wildlife areas. And it struck me that this knowledge was already there.
Yeah.
This is the first time I'm hearing that there's a spiritual connection as well. And it's very telling that one of the things we are forgetting as a species is that we will be better at solving the issues that are the greatest threat to humanity by looking into how things have been done for many, many generations before us. Because those methods work. And in addition to working, they connect us to something much more powerful than ourselves. Your experience being chairwoman of the tribe, I heard your mother was a chairwoman before
Previous chair for 40 years.
For 40 years?
Long tenure. Had deep shoes to fill there.
Did you think you wanted to do this job?
Oh, definitely not. Growing up, I said, no way. I do not want to do what mom's doing. The political world, right? Politics was just terrible for me. I mean, just witnessing what she had to go through. It was hard on her.
What were some of your memories of that?
Well, the first memory that I had of her, I was 8 years old, around 7 or 8. It was the old Holiday Inn site in San Jose. It was an archaeological find. It was a cemetery, the Muwekma Ohlone Cemetery, right downtown San Jose. And it was, that was a pivotal point for the tribe. That was in the early 80s, maybe 80, 81 when it happened. Everybody showed up on site, the different families, my mother, my grandmother included, to stop a mass desecration of the ancestors that were being uncovered. A white anthropologist told her when they showed up that you don't belong here, that these are not your ancestors and the Ohlone people are extinct because you are not federally recognized. And mind you, federal recognition list had barely been established in 1978, an official list of recognized tribes, and we were not on that list. So this anthropologist is telling my mom, you're not federally recognized and the Ohlone people are extinct, so get off this site. Well, from what I understand is he got physical, touched my grandmother on her shoulder to I'm assuming to physically remove her from the site. Well, my mother begged to differ. She hit him with a shovel.
Wow.
Pretty hard because she went to jail.
Oh.
But as an 7, 8-year-old, I remember it vividly because the cops came to get her. She went to jail. She lost her home. My family went bankrupt over it. It was devastating and traumatic for us. Me, my brother, and my sister was just born. She was just in Pampers, so having to leave our home and go live with family. But it didn't stop her. It didn't stop the families, the tribe from, protecting our ancestors and doing what was right for our people. And so that pivotal moment was, what do you mean we're extinct? And what do you mean that we're not federally recognized? Because we never understood what that meant at that point. We always understood, at least my grandmother and her aunts and uncles before her, we were under federal jurisdiction, meaning the government, we were the ward of the government. So my mother, got to work right after that, after she dealt with the bankruptcy and jail time and said, hey, of course, she asked permission from her aunties that, can I do research and find out, what this is entailing? So 40 years of research, of the villages we came from. We always knew we came from the Bay Area. We came from these different places. We were all forced in. All these people were forced into the 3 Bay Area missions. First, Mission Dolores, then Santa Clara, and then San Jose. We were moved around like cattle. But the surviving people was our nation. And we were identified in 1905 and 1906 because we ended up on the east side, East Bay, right on Phoebe Hearst's land. And in the Alisal Rancheria. So we had casitas right next to her railroad station called the Verona. She named her private railroad station Verona Station. So when they identified our people in these casitas, they named us after the railroad station, Verona Band.
What year was that?
1905 and 1906.
1905 and 1906.
So this was a part of an Indian census because 50 years before that, in 1848, it was 51, there was treaties being established here on the West Coast, in California specifically. They wanted to do the same thing they did on the East Coast, create treaties with tribes. So they were trying to copy and paste what they did on the East Coast over here on the West Coast. But then gold was found. So they buried those treaties and killed the Indians instead. I mean, they had $5 bounties on our people's heads. Actually, up and down California, they had bounties because the first governor, Peter Burnett, that was his policy, extermination.
Wow, that is brutal.
Yes. So in 1905 and 6, we were identified by the Indian census because there was at the time, he wasn't an Indian agent. He was an anthropologist, I believe, S.E. Kelsey. He lived in San Jose. So he went up and down California identifying bands and tribes who were in need of land because we were homeless. And he identified us specifically on Phoebe Hearst's land. Our families lived on 2 settlements. Niles, which was just a mile or 2 away from Phoebe Hearst's land in Pleasanton. But these 2 families interacted with each other. But we were in 2 different places because we were the handmaids. We were the labor force for the Mexican period and now the American period, Phoebe Hearst specifically. So we were identified in need of land. So we are put on this list along with 134 other tribes to receive land. And this was actually mandated by Congress. There was a Congressional Appropriations Act to buy land for California homeless Indians. We're on this list. So 1913, 1914, 1927, we're all still on this list to receive land. But then another Indian agent, Lafayette Dorrington, decided not to buy land for any more Indians in California. So, because what he said is we shouldn't be buying any more land. There was $16,000 in the general fund to continue buying land for the rest of the Indians on this list. And he said to Congress, we shouldn't be buying land for any more Indians. The land we already bought land for, like there was other rancherias up north, they bought land for those tribes. So the land we already bought for the Indians, let's continue to take care of them and stop buying more land for more Indians here in California. So he effectively took everybody off the list. Congress did not mandate that to take tribes off the list. So he illegally terminated our status. That would never be said. They can't say that because it's illegal for the BIA to terminate tribes. Only Congress and an administrative executive order can terminate tribes.
And the BIA, I've recently learned more about the Bureau of Indigenous Affairs or Indian Affairs. I think of it as Indigenous, but I think the official name is Bureau of Indian Affairs. They're a federal government body that oversees tribal land.
Right.
And so...
Well, tribal affairs. The Bureau of Indian Affairs handled the tribal affairs, but the Interior handles land management and specifically Indian land as well, usage. So the Bureau handles everything, even the federal acknowledgement process. So they review if tribes are looking to become acknowledged by the government. They have to go through a process. So they oversee those Indian affairs issues, but land issues, it goes to the Interior.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It goes through the Interior.
So for my people, that issue there in 1927, effectively, we call that was a point of political erasure for my people, along with the 134 other tribes in California. And so going back to the old Holiday Inn site where I said that was a pivotal moment for our tribe, because all the research that we did, and it started in the 80s, right after. So when my mother was gathering this information, there was other people telling her, you need to go to the Bureau of Indian Affairs because you need to go through the federal acknowledgement process to get on that list that they talked about, that 1978 list. So my mom did more research. And she ultimately found out, wait a minute, We were already acknowledged by the federal government. Why do we need to go back and get re-acknowledged by the government when they already did? This federal acknowledgement process is for tribes that were never acknowledged by the federal government and actually slipped between the cracks. But if they can prove that they actually connected to a historical group that was acknowledged by the government back in the day, but who are still the same people today, who have continued throughout time and are the same people today, okay, that makes sense. But for us, it doesn't make sense to be re-acknowledged when we are the same people. And so when she approached the Bureau of Indian Affairs and OFA, which was the Office of Federal Acknowledgement Department, they said, no, you still need to go through that process. And my mom pushed back for quite a bit of time, because at that time there was 2 other tribes who were under the same situation as Muwekma, who was on that list to receive land, who was acknowledged as a historic tribe, and the same people are staying together throughout time to today. They were, they call it administrative correction by the Assistant Secretary of the BIA. So my mom asked for the same treatment. And it was a simple letter, Nicole, as saying, we made a mistake. We forgot to add them to that 1978 list. And now we are. Now we're going to add them. And they didn't have to go through this whole process of being re-acknowledged. So my mom asked for the same treatment. And they said, no, you have to go through OFA. You have to go through the re-acknowledgement. And she says, we're the same. We're the same situations here. We need to be treated equally. But I say, the reason it's political. I say Muwekmas, we don't have an evidence problem. We have a corruption problem. That's what Muwekma has. It's the politics involved.
Do you think it's the politics of the Bay Area specifically? Because it is such a commercially dense, crowded region?
Most definitely. I mean, the land is too valuable here. It's the most valuable land in the world, I think. Silicon Valley is right here. There's too much at stake. And I do have to say, I know I'm bouncing around here, but when my mom was, reaching out to our local representatives at the time, she met with Feinstein 30 years ago. And she told my mother, I don't want an urban tribe in my area.
What?
Yes. And that was when I became the chair. I also met twice with her office. And she said the same thing to me.
That's really shocking. And that kind of confirms what I've been seeing as well in the United States generally, is that the progressives, or these blue cities, actually have been much harder on the tribes than some of the conservative, more right-wing cities and towns in Middle America.
Right.
And I was chatting with a friend of mine who was President Obama's advisor on Indigenous policy, and she was telling me the same thing, that you would expect that anytime there's a progressive in office, things are better for Indigenous communities. But the opposite is true, that there's a practicality to how Republicans have looked at Native rights to land.
Right.
And it's more, really, there's an appreciation with understanding the land. There's an appreciation with conservation. There's an appreciation of the beauty and the rawness, and wanting to protect it from development.
Right.
And I was very, I was blown away, and I keep confirming this. The more stories I hear, the more it seems to be true.
It is. And I'm shocked myself. And I have to share this story. My dad, he's a Republican, and my mother's a Democrat. And he always said to me, he'd always say, the Republicans are always for the Indians. they actually step up for the natives. He goes, you're not going to find a Democrat who's going to step up. And I'm like, oh, Dad, I don't know if that's true, but I'm finding out the same. Because look at our representatives here today. Yeah. All the representatives in our Aboriginal territory, Muwekma's Aboriginal territory, they all want us to give up a piece of our sovereignty. And I have to say one specific representative, Zoe Lofgren. She was the one. And I was more shocked, Nicole, about that, because in the 80s, she witnessed my mother going to jail over the repatriation of our ancestors, the struggle of our tribe to protect the desecration of our people, our dead. And she was a county supervisor, Santa Clara County supervisor at the time.
Yeah.
And she stood with us. I mean, she helped my mother get through that process, create some policies that protected us. I mean, actually, the tribe campaigned for her when she first ran for Congress against Mayor McHenry. I mean, it was a tight race, but the tribe stood by her, fundraised, campaigned, was along with her for the ride, right? To make sure that she was able to succeed, and she did. And so she actually in 2000, I think 2000 or 2002, she spoke on the House floor supporting our recognition effort, actually saying she saw our evidence and she agreed we should be on that list of recognized tribe. And here today, she's asking us to give up a piece of our sovereignty. So I've been the chair now 6 years. And for 4 years, when I first became the chair, I knew she was an ally, or I thought. I said, she's the one I'm going to reach out to and see how we can move this forward, through legislation, through Congress. She never returned my call. 4 years it took. But what it ultimately took, Nicole, is when I reached out to Representative Anna Issue, she got on the phone with me and asked me, what's going on? What do you need? I explained to her, I need legislation to restore our sovereignty. And she goes, well, what's the problem? I said, there isn't a problem, not with our evidence. The problem is special interests. That's the problem. I go, it's going to take somebody who has courage to do the right thing here. And she goes, well, what does that mean? I said, it's our gaming tribes who are fighting Muwekma's sovereignty because they're looking at us as competition. So they have millions of dollars they're spending to stop it. And she says, I will spearhead this. I will introduce it. You go out and get everybody to support this. No problem. I will reach out to everybody. Everyone, Rokana, Eric Swalwell, Jimmy Panetta, they all jumped on board to support this. When Zoe got wind of it, it all stopped real quick in its tracks. And she said, I mean, when I finally met with her staff, not even her, her staff said, well, Zoe doesn't want gaming. She has a personal issue with gaming. I said, what does gaming have to do with sovereignty? Sovereignty is this is a different issue. Gaming's an economic development if we choose to use that tool.
I mean, it seems like sovereignty is sovereignty. And was there anything that you felt about the gaming that felt a little suspicious, and that maybe she was receiving funds from another tribe? I mean, what do you think her issue is with that? It's very standard here in California.
It is. I still don't understand it, but it's clear that only because of her reversal on supporting us. Because before, when she became the congresswoman in her early years, that never was an issue. Why is it an issue now? Why is gaming an issue? She supported full sovereignty. And that's what I'm fighting for, to be treated like every tribe in California who's recognized today. They have full rights. That's all we're asking, is to be treated like every other tribe. We refuse to be second-class citizens in Indian country, in California. There was two propositions that were passed, Proposition 5 and Proposition 1A. So California constituents voted to give tribes the right to do gaming on their own lands if they choose to do so. It's their economic right. And the citizens said, yes, we support this. So I'm confused about why does she want to take a piece of our rights away when California's saying we're okay with this because we want tribes to nation build. We want tribes to lift themselves up, we're still at the bottom. We're still suffering from generational trauma. We're still trying to support our children into higher education. We still suffer from drug abuse, health issues. We're the highest rate percentage in diabetes, health, heart disease, missing, murdered Indigenous women issues, being kidnapped, trafficked, all of it. We're not protected community at all.
And so you come from a lineage of such strong women who've been working on this generation after generation. You took it upon yourself to then run against ZO in this last primary.
Yes. That was, I laugh about it because it wasn't an easy decision, Nicole, because stepping into the position as chairwoman as well, because I didn't want the politics. I'm very private. I don't like to be exposed out there. You're just open, to the public, and it's scary.
I can empathize with that feeling.
Yeah. So it took me a while, even for the chairwoman position. But when you're asked, you can't say no.
I know
and
that
my
feeling.
mother, and my mother was in the same position.
Yeah.
When you're asked, you can't say no. You got to make it work.
You got to make it work.
When I came into the position, it was life-changing for myself and my children and my husband. We had to switch gears because we were focused on our business. And but I knew it was, I had to do it. I had to continue the efforts of the previous chair, the previous aunties and uncles who have passed. And I grew up in it, seeing those struggles. So taking that up, it was hard and not easy, but it was a must too. I knew I had to keep going because even though I didn't realize they were grooming me and they were grooming the young people to come up into these leadership roles. We didn't understand that, but now today we understand it. Like we're taking up these issues so we don't die off. So we're not gentrified out of our area, and we keep fighting to stay in our homeland.
Yeah.
And to get sovereignty and to stay here so that we can continue to protect our ancestors. And that was, switching over to looking at Congress. That wasn't an easy decision at all either. It was like, but I knew I had to because she's our roadblock.
Yeah.
She's our roadblock. And the other thing, it's not all about my tribe and my people. It's about the community. We're all faced with being gentrified. I feel like we're not going in the right direction, and we have to jump in. As scary as it is, we got to jump in and try our best to change things. That's how I see it.
It's more to me than even gentrification. It's this ongoing forgetfulness, this ongoing illusion. And it's missing a very key and important component of what makes the Bay Area special, which is an understanding of these incredible natural systems all around us. And so I think about you, and I think about your ancestors on this land, how they understood how all of these systems worked. and how they understood, how they spoke to each other, how the waterways and the marshlands and the birds and the migratory, I mean, just talking about the migration that happens here and the enormous numbers of birds that move through our bay.
Right.
And the fish, and how the fish, you know, are on the outside of the coast, and how, you know, the bay is used to clean all of these waterways from the delta and all of these other streams that come through here, and the reservoir, the natural, you know, bodies of water that collect. It's really hard for me to see what has happened to this place over the last few generations with creating landfills in the bay, many of which are very toxic, we're realizing, and polluting our waters in ways that are impacting our soils, are impacting our fertility rates.
Right. I mean, we drink this water. This is life. And, you know, I'm not going to pretend. I mean, my people, when first contact happened, we were stripped. We were stripped from our lands. We were stripped from our culture, our language, our ceremonies. So we were so disconnected, like this generation, my generation, my mother generation. We were disconnected from the land. So now today, we are relearning what the land means to us. It's like it's in us. It really is. Because once we get on the land, we feel it, you know, and we feel connected. We know that water gives us life. We know that we have to protect water. We have to protect the fish. We have to protect the birds, the land that we live on. Because all these elements give us life, all of us life.
Yeah.
And that's how I have to go back to why I started 15 years ago. I got into the textile recycling industry with my husband and our some family members. But that was the idea, is look at the amount of stuff that is ending up in our waterways that can be reused. Mainly, I work with a nonprofit down south, and I want to give him a shout out, Herman Garcia with Cheer. And he's doing so much work. He's 75 years old. Wow. And he's in the waterways cleaning it up. So 10 years ago, actually, I saw his garbage museum in one of the local Morgan Hill newsletters. And I said, oh my goodness, I need to connect with that guy.
Yeah.
Because he created this garbage museum that shows the kids everything that ends up in our waterways. I mean, you have clothes, shoes, cars, tires, you name it, it's there. But it affects us because we drink the water and we eat the fish. So when I connected with him, I said, I have this program that I work on. We collect donation clothes and shoes and and my main goal when I started is to keep that out of our landfills, keep that out of our waterways. So I created this unit. And when we started 15 years ago with those smaller donation boxes, and, I was out there, going to city meetings, county meetings, meeting with the property owners, and they said, this is a nuisance, people just dumping these things here to collect, and we don't know where the proceeds are going and what their organizations are about. So talking to my partners, I said, I need to come up with something better that ties into our message and does good for the community. I mean, this is the goal. So we created this donation box. It's a lot bigger. It's a Connex box. So we reuse the Connex box. We repurposed it into a donation station.
That's
so
great.
We have solar panels, cameras around it to, be able to watch it inside and out. Inside more specifically, so we could keep an eye on the overflow. Because I'm listening to the community saying, this is an eyesore when people dump their garage. They create a big mess.
Yep.
So I said, bigger is better and we need it monitored. So I looked at my husband like, how can you make this happen? Because this is what I need.
Yeah.
So putting our heads together, we were able to create a really good system. And we've created really good partnerships that share the same vision about keeping Mother Earth healthy for the next generations. You know, we work overseas in Central America with partners there who really shared our vision. We've been with them for 15 years. And they have reused clothes in Guatemala all the way in, you know, to El Salvador, Honduras, and Mexico. So everything, I have to say, we're so proud that everything we collect does not touch the ground. We've been able to create a closed loop system where it's sent to Guatemala, processed, sent into their stores. And what doesn't resell in their stores, we've actually created a fiber reclamation plant.
Oh, wow.
So we are creating new product now out of the stuff that isn't sold in the stores.
That's fantastic.
I mean, they're working on mattresses, household mittens, and stuff like that, and they sell it right back out into their stores. So it's important that we create those relationships that have that vision of protecting Mother Earth.
What is your dream for what happens the moment the tribe receives recognition?
My dream is having a homeland and building a native village for my people. A village, a homes that all our members, you know, live in, with a ceremonial space, you know, so that our young people who are revitalizing our ceremonies can practice that right there in our homeland. We can invite other guests, other relatives to share ceremony right here on our homeland, because most of the time we have to travel out now to practice and celebrate ceremony with others. We have to go to their homeland and you know, do these practices. But now we'll be able to, the goal is to, you know, have our own homeland, to invite our relatives over into our home and share a ceremony, share a meal. You know, that's my ultimate dream, is to keep them here, because our kids, it's scary. It really is.
The kids of the Bay Area are really suffering. I don't know a family who doesn't have a child struggling with something or a parent struggling with something. It seems we've oversaturated with tech, which is, you know, what can humans engineer versus how do we connect with our natural environment and synchronize with it so that it can continue to support us.
Right.
So it seems like a really important rebalancing that could happen for the Bay Area, to have a group that is native to this land, who knows and understands this land through traditions and song and prayer and ceremony, and reconnect us to this place. There's so much, like, you know, when we started talking, you said there's so much at stake. Like, it feels like we're at that tipping point of we have to reconnect before we don't have people who know how to connect with this land anymore here.
And we're doing it together. We are doing it together. The First Peoples and the community. This is a learning experience for us all. It really is. And, you know, our old ways, the special part for us is that it was recorded and it was written down, how our ancestors did things.
Wow.
So, and that's how we're able to learn today. You know, our youth are, like I said, you know, my Suya Joey, he's revitalizing our ceremony, our spiritual ways. And the reason why is because it was written down. It was recorded when we were being interviewed by the anthropologists that were identifying us in 1905, 1906, 1921, 1927, all the way into the 30s. You know, our great aunties were being recorded, our language. You know, I mean, like I said, at first contact, we were stripped of everything right here in the Bay Area. We couldn't speak our language. We couldn't practice our ceremonies.
How did the language survive?
It was recorded. It was written down. And so we were able to, in 2002, a couple of our tribal, our council members, were able to go back and work with UC Berkeley's linguists and put those words together and create, you know, recreate the language.
Mm-hmm. That's
So,
wonderful.
yeah. I mean, I have to say we have 5 fluent speakers. So the kids today are learning.
That's
We're
wonderful.
learning the language. I'm not a fluent speaker. I
Yeah.
could say a few things, but yeah, eventually I do also want to get there and learn to sing, the healing songs as well.
Mm-hmm. It's so important. Ron Korn was also in Oakland at the VP announcement, and I had first been introduced to Ron's organization and tribe, the Menominee
Right.
tribe, because he's one of the last 2 remaining speakers. And hearing Ron talk about the importance of what language represents, that it's more than just reading and writing and communicating, it's deeply spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
And that by speaking the language, he's able to connect with his own spirituality and his ancestors and the land
Mm-hmm.
in ways that he wasn't able to in English. And so the importance of keeping that language alive is also because embedded in the language are clues on how nature operates.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I think many of us are starting to wake up to this, that this is what has been lost is actually a blueprint to how to engage with these lands
Mm-hmm.
in a way that is productive to the land and to the health of the community. Directly, like biologically and scientifically.
Mm-hmm. We just have to lean in. We all have to lean in and do the work, right, to learn, because it's there. It's not gone. It's just asleep, and we got to lean in to reawaken it. And you're right. It starts with the first peoples, because it is there. It was recorded, at least for us in the Bay Area. We have the language, and we have the ways things were done on the land. I didn't even know this, but meeting with a few people who are working on the land, they said the native plants are here. They're actually still here. We have a lot of the invasive plants, but we got to remove those and kind of move the ground up, move it around to reawaken the native plants.
The seeds are still there.
The seeds are still there.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I'm all, is there any way we can create kind of like a seed bank or, greenhouse to store these so that we can, store them and then plant them throughout the Bay Area? Because if we look at all the fires that are happening, it's because of these invasive plants.
Mm-hmm.
If you look back at, how the Bay Area looked, we didn't have these massive fires going on because the plants, the tar plants that were there stopped the fires from traveling. They're there still. I mean, I think right here in Woodside on Kite Park, I got to get the name for you, but the native plants have bloomed.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's a plot of land where it's been restored, and it's beautiful.
Oh my goodness, I'll have to go check it out.
It's just right here in your backyard.
Oh, great.
Yes.
I'll definitely go check it out.
So it's been restored 100% to native plants. It's a small plot, but it's a start.
It's a start. And the power of understanding the native plants gives us a sense of how the ecology of the area is designed to operate. And if we're going to understand how to heal the land and what those plants are, I think also we'll find medicinal plants that help us heal, that are the seasonal. My understanding is that they're seasonal plants that help our immune systems be robust, to fight viruses, to fight infections.
Right. No, they're all over the Bay Area. Mugwort, elderberry. Actually, when I get sick, I've been getting colds quite often because I'm probably a little run down. But my cousin, Joey, he supplies me with the organic. He makes it himself, elderberry.
Oh.
And it helps.
Yeah.
It definitely helps, with the cough and cold, and it works quickly where I don't have to go to the doctor's office, right, and get antibiotics, which is probably not natural to the body, the system.
We're learning antibiotics are incredibly hard on the body, and they wipe out a lot of the beneficial bacteria in our stomachs in particular. It's interesting. I was here a few weeks ago with a reporter from the Washington Post, and she came in and she had her N95 mask, and we got to talking about the pandemic. And she felt that the, openness and the liberalness of reopening has left a lot of immune compromised people at risk. And I understood. I fully understood what she was talking about. I know immune compromised people, and one of the things that dawned on me during this conversation was that so much of the way we look at medicine today is a little bit backwards. We're so focused on pathogens. We're so focused on killing pathogens at all costs, to the extent that, we've now killed off a lot of really healthy immune function in order to kill those pathogens. And my understanding of indigenous medicine is that there's a balance of both improving immune function and warding off pathogens.
Right.
It strikes me that that's the kind of medicine that would really help our civilization today. This idea that we can improve immune function, and that is as important as a form of medicine as, killing off pathogens. My instinct tells me that if we start appreciating our land more and understanding the medicinal quality of our environment, that we'll be able to actually overcome a lot of the chronic disease that we're facing in this country.
I agree. But the problem I see, this is just common sense for me, is what's stopping that? Because I think scientists know, right, that the natural lands provide the medicine to heal people. But I think there's corruption there. I think the pharmaceuticals stop that from happening because they want to make a buck. They want to make $1. And it benefits them to keep people sick so that they can continue making their dollars, because I think you're right that the land does provide the medicine to heal, the natural organic medicine to heal people and to stop this chronic disease from continuing. I don't think we need to be sick.
No.
And and we need to be outside in nature. Like I keep saying that this generation, my children, I see them, I watch them. I always encourage them to go outside and play. They want to be indoors on their iPads, on their phones.
Right.
And
none of these devices are tested for safety on children.
No, and
Not one of them.
remember growing up, we were always outside as on the weekends when you're not in school, from morning till nighttime. I remember eating dirt. I was just sharing this with my kids. I was eating dirt. I was drinking from the water hose. I was eating the plants where you blow, the little white
I ate
puffy.
those too.
Because it was so good. The
juice,
grasses
that you could open up and there'd be a little seed inside,
and the juice and I said I would just suck on those. Me and the neighbors, we were out there picking plants and eating it, and nobody said don't do that.
Yeah.
Honestly, it probably had dog poo all over it, but we were okay, is what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
We survived, and we built this immune system.
Right. In partnership with our environment.
Yes, right? Exactly.
And it was a partnership, and it was something that we accepted as normal, natural, and healthy. And
right.
You had mentioned something about corruption. In your run for Congress, I read that you wanted to very clearly separate yourself from any conflicts of interest. So you stated that you would not take any corporate PAC dollars to support your race. you said that I'd read, you said you were going to forego
My
taking
salary.
and donate it.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come to that decision? I mean, clearly it's very hard to run for any seat in this country without accepting PAC dollars. So, but you felt that this was an important thing to establish as you went into the election. What did that mean for you, and what was the what were you conveying, and why is this important?
It's very important in today's world because I think that's the problem. I think that's why like our representatives aren't eager to find solutions, is because we're, the big corporations are there influencing decisions. That's corruption. We're not looking at the people and, what they want, our communities want. It's what the big corporations want. And that's why it was so important for me to separate myself. I'm here for public service, just like I am as for my tribe, my nation. I want to serve the people of the community. And I have to separate myself from any corporate donors who will influence my decisions. They're going to push me to do what they want me to do, not what the people want. That's why it was so important. And that was my decision to do that, because I want to serve the people, not big corporations or PACs.
Yeah.
And my salary, it's, donating it to organizations, but also having accountability, right? Making sure these organizations that I donate my salary to are going to benefit the community and what they want to see. That was important as well.
It's amazing how much wealth is in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about my neighborhood alone. There's probably, 8 or 9 billionaires within 2 miles, and you expand it out and to include San Francisco, and there's a lot of billionaires here in the Bay Area, and these are, oftentimes primary homes and where they come to work. So it's where they've come to make their wealth is here.
Right.
And if you look at the state of politics and who's funding candidates, it's these individuals, and I am speaking from personal experience. And I oftentimes found myself in a situation where I was a bit of an outsider because I see things differently than some of my neighbors here. I see them through the lens of somebody who grew up in Oakland in the East Bay, who did not migrate to Silicon Valley to strike it rich. I was born and raised here. That perspective changes, I think, how you think about your responsibility to your community. And I can't imagine what it would be like to have ancestors that have been on this land for 10,000 years and how that would impact my sense of duty to my community. It must be an incredibly powerful motivation for you.
Oh, most definitely. It is. It is, because what I say to everyone that I get the chance to speak to, it would be shameful of me not to fight, right, for our rights to stay on our homeland because of everything that my ancestors went through. The resilience, the strength, the tenacity of the genocide. They went through a genocide here, but they survived it. That's why we're here today. And that's what gives me the power to keep pushing forward and doing what's right, not just for Muwekma community, but for the whole community. We all should have, a good life, a healthy life. This is our right.
So Zoe Logfriend, she would be able, if she decided to, push forward legislation for the Muwekma.
She could, but I'm not waiting for her.
Are you going to run again?
I am in 2026. If she's still going to run, if it's not her, could be someone else, successor. They're grooming already to,
To
if she
replace these
to
seats.
replace her if she decides to retire. But if I get recognition before that, get our sovereignty restored, then I will focus on, the tribal nation rebuilding, building our foundation. But like I keep saying, it benefits the community. Our community benefits the outer community, and they miss that.
Yeah.
The politicians in the Bay Area miss that. That we all benefit. When the first peoples benefit, so does the community benefit. For keeping us here, for staying here. Because once we're gone for good. And we'll be disconnected even from each other. And that's what I'm fighting the hardest, is to keep our nation, our children together. Because when one person leaves, they lose their identity. They're going to lose
Connection to
ancestors, connection to the stories, to each other.
Let's talk about ancestors. I am half Chinese, and the Chinese have a very strong ancestral practice where you will burn incense and keep pictures. That connection is, after the Communist Revolution, a lot of it was taken away. These very, very powerful ceremonies and traditions and understanding of what an ancestor is. This idea that there's a lineage and there's a connection to the story of these people who have lived these lives before you and are responsible for you being here in this moment. In your life, what has connection to ancestors meant for you?
Oh, it's a deep connection for us. For me, personally, just because as a child, my mother took us to the burial sites. I mean, I worked on burial sites since I was 8 years old.
Wow.
So we have a responsibility to be responsible, when they are uncovered. We don't want them uncovered. There was mass development happening in the Bay Area. But since I could remember, I've always been a part of that process, making sure that we were responsible. It was our duty to make sure they weren't desecrated or harmed. But if they were uncovered, we respectfully removed them. And we were we wanted to make sure they were reburied as close to their original resting place as possible. And, of course, there's always a ceremony with that, with sage, putting them back to rest with sage and cedar and tobacco, an offering to them with tobacco and a shell, abalone shell. There's even the sites that were uncovered, most of the burials had offerings. They had pedestals, they had a flower pot buried with them with regalia, their shell beads and abalone, with them. So we returned them back to the ground with those same offerings, but it was and I feel them with me, Nicole. That meeting I had, I don't know if whenever you have a moment, go to Muwekma's website. The recording of the January meeting last year is on our website with the 5 representatives. It was pretty intense moment for me, that meeting, because they were asking me to give up, they were asking our tribe to give up a piece of our rights. And my husband was with me in that meeting. And when we walked out, he says, wow, you were like really cool. Not upset, which I'm surprised you didn't get up and just, react. I said, you know what? I felt my ancestors with me. I actually felt their hand on my shoulder, holding me down, because believe me, it was intense. And it was hard for me to hear some of the things I was listening to. But they were with me and they kept me calm so that I can understand and I can articulate back to them what our wishes were. and what we were not going to give up. I go, but they gave me the strength to stay there calm and collective, you know. I
Yeah.
really felt that. And my grandmother is always with me. She's always with me. I feel her sense, her presence with me always. And and just going to the ocean too. Anything to do with water really clears my mind. You know, when things are stressful, I go to the water.
Same. The ocean is very, very powerful. Yeah, the power of ancestors. It's also seems to be partially one of the reasons young people are starting to feel disconnected. They're more connected to their devices and less connected to their ancestors. And maybe that means finding one's calling becomes harder
Yes.
in life, finding passion and that energy and that perseverance to overcome significant adversity.
It's true. Makes sense. Makes total sense.
Yeah. And every tradition has an ancestor element to it, which I find fascinating. Cultures that are vastly different and, you know, have taken shape on over different timelines have this root, this, you know, this ancient root to appreciating the power of your ancestors.
And I think it's even more, I guess, significant, I guess is the word, when you're on your homeland, the very homeland that your ancestors
Yeah.
are buried in, because their energy is actually right there with you, right?
Yeah.
Pushing you forward, doing like you're persevering, like you're saying, staying strong and pushing on what's important for the people.
Yeah. It's so hard for me to even, I like conceptually can imagine how amazing that would feel. My family, I come from two sets that have gone through diaspora effectively, like the Chinese in diaspora. You know, my ancestors on my mother's side, my grandfather's family, they're from Macau, this tiny island in southern China. And I believe that my ancestors were there for many, many generations, from my understanding. But I was born here in Oakland, California, and so there's this sense of deep diaspora, of deep kind of longing for an understanding of where I come from. And then on the Irish side, similarly, escaping the potato famine and coming to America so poor. And, you know, my grandfather on my dad's side was one of 9 Irish kids living in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
And I've never even been to, you know, where he's from. I actually have no idea where he's from. They were living in slums, I believe, at the time. But and then I have a German grandmother who came here to kind of escape what was going on in Germany in the pre-World War I days, which was a very hard time to be in Germany.
Right.
And so it would be, I mean, I just want to almost imagine for a moment, I meditate into what it would feel like to be part of this ancestral lineage where, you know, families have been in the same place for 10,000 years. And there's a memory of that.
Right.
That just sounds so extraordinary and so powerful and so connected to the trees and the soil and the waterways and the animals and the birds.
And that's why it's so special. I mean, and the community needs to realize the special community that is still here. And it's going to be gone. It's going to be gone.
It's not going to be gone.
No, it's not, because I'm pushing.
Because you and your ancestors are making sure that does not happen.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's a struggle. It's a struggle because of what's happening today, right? We live and breathe what everybody lives and breathes is the cost of living to stay here in the Bay Area. You know, homelessness, drug abuse, all of it. And, people always ask me, well, what does federal recognition do for you? What does all that mean for your people? Well, it means that we'll be able to survive, continue to stay together, uplift our people out of poverty, incarceration. We still face this. We still have all these elements of the atrocities, the trauma that has been put on us from first contact. We're still suffering from that today. And, I said federal recognition comes with repatriation of our ancestors. I go, because of that law, NAGPRA, the Native American Repatriation Act, I know I'm saying that wrong, we cannot repatriate our ancestors that are sitting in the museums, especially UC Berkeley. Hearst Museum has over 12,000 of our ancestral dead. 250,000 artifacts that go with these burials. That's just from one county, Nicole, Alameda County.
Oh my
There are
God.
other counties that have ancestors collections associated with the sites that were uncovered in the early century. We cannot repatriate those collections because we're not on that 1978 official list. And that has always been our tribe's priority, starting in the 60s. And housing, being able to afford, have a homeland for our people, that native village, that my dream for my people. The other thing is education. You know that the UC system just a couple years ago passed a policy that they give federally recognized tribes, all their members, free tuition to be in their schools,
That's
to
a
be
big
at
deal.
UC Berkeley, to be at Irvine, to be at,
There's so many campuses. There's like 6 or 7 campuses in the state of California.
we can't access that because we're not on federally recognized. So, like I said, pulling ourselves up from the nation building, building our young people up so that they can go into higher education.
And continue this good work of understanding how 10,000 years of history have gone on here.
Exactly.
And what makes the Bay Area one of the most powerful centers on the planet.
Right.
My guess is that it has always been a very powerful place.
Right.
And that we have to protect it.
We do. And protect the people that
and
came
protect
from
the
these
people
lands.
that came from the land.
Yeah. And the one thing, we started our land trust 2 years ago. And before we started, I had a professor from Stanford University, Michael Wilcox. He says, we need, Ama Mutsun, our neighboring tribe down south to us, started their land trust about 10 years ago. And they're doing wonderful work. And, I said, yes, they are. But one question I have is we can get this started. But what happens when our young people are no longer here? How can we make decisions on our land from a conservation, mindset here? How do we make decisions when we're a state away, when we're no longer here no longer here living here? How can we continue this work? Just doesn't make sense to me.
It's not possible.
No, it isn't.
And with 5 remaining speakers of the language, I mean, preservation of the language is so fundamental as well. And preservation of the knowledge and preservation of the corpus of the identity of the tribe.
Right.
Which I had no idea that they were being kept in archives owned by effectively the state.
Yes. They're all over. They're in other countries.
Oh my goodness.
They are. I mean, when this, we had the Russians here in the beginning before the Spanish came, exploring. When their first explorers came, they took things back home with them. But when the mass development started happening in the early century, that's, here in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
That's when the ancestors were being uncovered and taken back. And it was, it was kind of a job for the anthropologists back then. And I say then they were, today it's the gaming tribes that are stopping our acknowledgement. But back then it was the anthropologists, it was the developers, the land owners We're stopping our acknowledgement.
New generation, new interest groups.
Exactly. Because the anthropologists back then, that they wanted to study our people, but they had to politically erase us or make sure we were extinct, because how they spoke to us even back then to today, we were people of the past. They never spoke to us or about us in the present. But there was a reason for that, because they wanted to continue to study our people without opposition.
Wow. Wow. It's unbelievable. And so you had mentioned that there's conflicts with other tribes. It reminds me of something that I learned recently in Arizona, where there's this sacred hot springs. And the sacred hot springs was a place where the tribes would lay down their differences and come, and each tribe would have access to this hot springs because it was so sacred and so full of these healing minerals. It's actually very high in lithium, which is something that feels really great when you soak in it. And so there were these locations, I'm now understanding, all through the United States, these sacred medicinal sites that the tribes would have the opportunity to settle differences at long enough, because these sites were so important, and recognized that healing is a right, is a right above a tribe's right. How do we bring that back?
That's a good question. I'm trying to figure that out now. Like I keep saying this, how do we come together? How do our Native brothers and sisters come together? Because we are so much stronger together. But it's unfortunate that greed and possession has gotten in our way, and they behave like the colonizers behave. Conquer and divide. It really is unfortunate. I don't have an answer to that yet. But it really is. Yeah. We do need to come together, and I don't know how to make this happen. Conversations, having communication. I think we're not going to agree on everything, right? But as long as we're having communications, open to communications is important.
I'm almost tempted to try to find where those sites were historically. Where
we have some sacred sites here, and specifically that I know of personally, just because my grandmother would take my mother there. My mother suffers from epilepsy as a young child, but Alum Rock Park, it was very special to my family. My grandmother would take my mother to the springs there and bathe her when she'd have her episodes, her seizures, and she would recover.
Really?
Yeah.
She would recover from
her seizures. And
oh my goodness.
The spells wouldn't last as long, where she'd stay in that forgetful, period. But yeah, she would, based on what my mom shared with us, grandma would bathe her in there as a young child in the springs at Alum Rock Park.
That's powerful.
Sunol is a very sacred place for us too. My grandmother was actually born at the Ohlone Wilderness Park in the back.
Wow.
Yep, right on the lands. Her mother, there's a strong connection to the land back there.
That seems...
There's crystal caves, but I don't know where.
Wow.
Back there.
Wow.
Yes.
That seems like an opportunity, because these behaviors that have been dividing us are making all of us so very sick. Sick physically, sick spiritually. Our communities are sick. Our children, are going to have a hard time. It's not the way of the future. I think we both feel that instinctively, that moving through life in this way is so painful and lacking of a sense of wellness.
Right.
And to return to a time which we can all have sovereignty, agency. We can have our own communities. We can have boundaries, healthy boundaries. But we have to remember that healing has to be the thing that supersedes our greed and divisiveness.
When you're talking about healing, you know, it starts with truth telling, acknowledging each other, speaking truth, and then healing, and sometimes forgiveness. And that one is sometimes harder, right? Forgiving and
Well, I really applaud you for engaging in the political process. It's not something that is easy because of the way it's done today. It's lost a lot of its dignity. And so being able to protect one's dignity as they go through the political process, it takes extra work today. You know, there's this common belief that the American politician has become this plastic politician, part of this uni-party. And it's becoming more and more apparent that there's been shoring up of political dollars and shoring up of political allegiances, that coming in as a true independent who is doing it just for their connection with the community is becoming more and more rare. And those are the races that I'm the most attracted to. And I think that you doing it is such an incredible example of leadership. Very powerful. And I can see Americans being able to tell the difference between who's being groomed by the uniparty and who is truly coming in as somebody who is doing it for that original purpose of representation of their community. There's some in Congress now that I see, and you can tell which ones are really doing it on behalf of their community and are thinking independently of the uniparty. And I think it's hard, but not impossible by any measure.
right.
So I really applaud you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I think that's why I feel this connection with you because and Mr. Kennedy, because our values, even my council, our tribal council that endorsed you guys, it's just we share those core values. We believe in those exactly that is that you truly believe that you are going to serve the people. You want to change things for the good, the health of our communities. And honestly, we believe that. We really believe that in both of you. And I feel this connection with you. I think we share a lot of similar, things in common, a lot of things in common when it comes to the environment, what we want, how we want to see our communities, for the next generations. It's really important.
And seeing abundance of childhood return, right? This idea that children should be free
Right.
to roam and to drink hose water.
Yeah, eat the grass.
And eat the grass and
Yes.
go forage for berries. I remember foraging for blackberries in the Oakland hills.
Oh, my parents, actually, it was my dad and my uncles. Whenever we'd go to my aunt's house, they would always take us to the creek to go crawdad fishing.
The crawdad
Yes.
fishing, I remember that too.
So we'd sit there all day long.
Yeah.
And we had a big pot one weekend. We were at my aunt's and we collected so many that they had a big pot. And my aunt said, now we're going to eat them. That was the first I said, what? I don't know if I could eat the crawdads.
I know.
It was like,
I found them quite cute. They're like tiny lobsters.
Yes, they were. And I'd love to pick them up, but I could not get myself to eat them,
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. And I had to leave the kitchen because they were screaming. She did cook them and she's like, we're going to eat them.
Oh my gosh, you could hear them cooking.
They were screaming. I said, I have to leave. I can't listen to this, and I'm not eating them.
Yeah.
I'm not eating them at all.
Oh. Well, I have great faith I think that there's more and more people I'm meeting in the Bay Area that understand this calling, they understand this duty, and they understand that it cannot go on disconnected from our congressional representatives anymore.
Right.
They're part and parcel with taking deep care of this place and representing this place in Washington, D.C. You can't separate those two duties.
We need more people like yourselves out there running for Congress, getting involved for this change, because I think our current representatives from the Bay Area, it's they've lost their way.
They've lost the plot a lot.
A lot.
Quite a
they
bit.
have.
And
they're not connected. They're not connected to the community,
and they
the
won't
land.
pass the torch.
Oh,
That's the thing also that's really wild, is that they won't leave office and just go enjoy their lives.
why
they
is
won't
that?
let go.
What's going on? I mean, literally, Dianne Feinstein passed away in office.
Yes.
That was devastating to watch. For me, that was elder abuse.
It's really bizarre to me what's been going on and with these seats and who's holding them up and who's really making the decisions for some of these individuals, because it does not seem like they are making the decisions themselves. And, if it's just making it a convenience
Right.
to centralize all authority, that is a level of corruption that all of us should be crying out against.
More of us need to cry out against. Yes. Because I think people are still comfortable right now. And it goes to corruption.
Yeah.
It's taking the big corporations out of the mix. Because then we can really focus on the solutions. The solutions are there, but there's no incentive to find solutions.
Yeah.
Once there's greed, there's that corruption, right? Of big tech or big pharma or, whatever big corporation is above dictating to our representatives what they want to see. And most of the time it's about how do we make more money?
I mean, Bay Area has all of the corporate interests represented. We have big tech, we have big pharma, Genentech is here. We have big, chemical companies here as well.
Right.
It's
mining, you're right.
We have it all here. And I
Right.
feel like the Bay Area has become a pressure cooker where we're seeing where all this leads us. This leads us into a complete abandonment of our community. And it's left us with leadership that has been the same leader. It's like, it's like Gavin Newsom over and over again. It's, Zoe Logren over and over again. Dianne Feinstein.
Right.
Barbara Boxer. Pelosi.
Yes.
They don't leave office and they don't let anybody else in.
Because they've made a career out of their seats. It's career politicians. That's what I call them. And that needs to leave. I'm sorry. We need to have term limits, age limits. I truly believe in age limits and term limits. We need people who represent the community today, the younger generation. They need to get into these roles, into leadership roles, because they're making decisions on what's happening today and the next generation. These guys are in office. They're making decisions and they're not going to be around to see them.
And quite frankly, are they even spending time with their own children and grandchildren? If they're spending their, these golden years,
Right.
we call them the golden years because they're your final years on this planet. And if they're not spending those years enjoying their children and connecting and understanding their grandchildren, I mean, that's a whole nother layer of disconnection and sacrifice.
Right.
That I don't think it makes them better as leaders. It also doesn't make the communities they've served better. It's not a good example for young people or for people interested in going into public service.
Right.
That once you're in, you're now part of this organization that expects you to complete your life in office. None of it makes any sense at all.
Right. It's true.
It really doesn't. I couldn't imagine starting my political life now and not ending it until I die. I mean,
Right.
that to me, as a 38-year-old mom, makes no sense. I'm like 4 years, 8 years max.
Right.
And then
Do what you need to do and move on and pass it along to the next generation to step up and follow it through.
and support them
Yes.
in their success.
Exactly.
And become a trusted advisor and a mentor.
Right.
And somebody who is a civilian who continues to do it because they're living their life in the community and they know how the job is done and can help and guide the next.
That's interesting you say that
Why?
because that's how we look at our elders. You know, they can stay in, like my mother, she retired after 40 years, passed the baton. But she's, like you said, an advisor, a person with a wealth of knowledge and experience. But she doesn't want to stay there forever. Our elders don't want to stay in leadership positions forever. They're there to support the next generation and guide them from their own experience and knowledge. And that's how Congress should be today, right? I mean, these older representatives need to retire and be in these roles of advisory roles.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
just-
Bernie Sanders just announced today he was going to run for another term.
Oh boy.
Just
I know what to
seems to be like, I mean, he could spend those next years mentoring
Right.
somebody who he feels would do a great job, and instead he wants to just hold on to it. It is not in the best interest of our political system to basically smoke out all life from these positions.
Right.
We have to keep them full of energy.
I don't know what to say. It's
Here we are.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? We can't give up.
No, we can't. And that's what I've been taught. And that's what I'm teaching my children and the young children in our tribal members is we can't give up. We got to keep pushing forward and persevering in the toughest times because that's what our ancestors did. And, just keep moving forward because they want us to give up. These older white people in the Bay Area want us to give up, but we will not give up. We will keep pushing forward and getting what our people deserve to be able to stay here. I mean, that's the ultimate goal is to stay here in our homeland.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing. I would love the idea of feeling connected to an ancestral place. But I am so proud to be an American, and I am on my mom's side first generation here, and it means the world to me.
Yeah.
It means the world to me. They all fled something to start over.
Right. On my dad's side, I have to say the same thing happened. My father's Portuguese.
Oh.
Both his parents are from the Azores, and they met when they migrated here to Ellis Island. That's where they both met and married. And my grandfather never became a citizen because he wanted, he came to America to, have a better life, create wealth, and then go back home to the Azores and live the remainder of his life in his homeland.
Yeah.
That was what he wanted to do. He didn't get the chance to. He died. But he was never a citizen because his goal was to go back home.
It reminds me of my grandmother who never really spoke great English, and she came here after I was born to help my mom raise me. And on her deathbed, she passed away in Oakland. On her deathbed, she said in Cantonese, I want to return home. And wanted to return back to China, to her ancestral land. And so I think that there is that deep, deep, raw connection to the lands that our family are from.
Right. Where you're from, where you were born, where your ancestors are from. Yeah. I think my grandfather felt that same thing.
It's very powerful. Well, thank you. I'll definitely be supporting your race.
Thank you. I'm definitely supporting you and Robert, and I wish you all the best. I really do. And
Thank you.
You are the change.
Oh.
You really are. You and Robert Kennedy are that change. It comes down to common sense, you know?
Common sense. And if you can think for yourself, it's amazing what kind of common sense you're capable of.
Right. Exactly.
You're not being told what to vote for.
Right. Exactly.
So let's hope for more of that and more bravery.
I definitely pray for both of you. I know you guys are facing challenging times, you know. I see he has a chance. He really does. And I have to say Biden and Trump are worried about that. Because at first they were trying to, not a big deal, but he's coming up because it makes everything he is saying, people are feeling it. It's common sense.
Yeah. And the media can't warp it forever.
Not at all.
Especially now that some of his, quote, conspiracy theories are all proving to be true. Many of them are. It just takes time.
Exactly. He just got to keep pushing forward and I could see he's strong and he's not letting it get to him. You know, you can't. I guess this is what I'm learning too. You know, the media is going to attack you. I mean, Zoe attacked me. She called me a Republican operative. You know, all of it. Yes. She was trying to smear me at the end.
What?
But it's part of
a Republican operative?
Yeah. My assistant, Matt Ricciazzi, he's Republican. You know, he's an independent journalist and he does that on his own time. But everything that he was writing and saying, she was trying to connect me to. She's still trying to connect me. I said, I'm not going to silence anybody's voice.
Yeah.
And take anybody's rights away.
Yeah.
You're just like you're asking me to take some of my people's rights. I'm not doing that to him. But he's my assistant. She was forcing me back then to fire him because she didn't like what he was writing. And I said, I'm sorry, that's his independent
it's called
voice.
Free speech.
Exactly.
It's called the First Amendment.
Right.
Which I thought she actually was a supporter of because her and I went to the same law school, Santa Clara University Law School. So I'm shocked that...
No, no, not at all.
I guess the quality of one's relationship to the Constitution, if you are a lifelong Democratic politician, goes down the drain during an election year.
Exactly. That's what happened, especially when there's a contender, right?
Especially,
a strong contender.
Yes.
So she came out full force against me towards the end.
Yeah.
So I know it's part of this political role and,
Yeah, but you should have decency and sportsmanship, and there should be no infringement of the Constitution, or even throwing away our democratic process. I mean, that's how Bobby and I are doing this race, and we are the underdogs, and we are fighting tooth and nail, and we're seeing it. We're seeing this playbook from both parties, honestly.
Oh, for sure.
And so running as an independent gives you a chance to not be part of, the Republican versus Democratic back and forth, which is so unhelpful. Would you ever consider running as an independent?
I was asked, actually, before I decided to run. I said, I don't want to give up on I've always been a lifelong Democrat. I want to reform the party. I want to take it back. But I'm actually...
make it fair again.
Yes.
Yeah.
I said, I'm starting to realize that might be an option, that I might have to switch to an independent. Because Democrats, they're just, I'm sorry, too far gone. They really are.
I haven't seen a fair primary in the last 10 years.
Yes.
It's been a while.
It has.
And And until we have fair primaries again,
Right.
where we're not calling our fellow Democrats spoilers and, Republican agents, or what was the word she said?
Operative is what she called me.
I mean,
It was crazy.
how silly is that?
Right.
It's
like I'm in the middle. I have my values and my beliefs are really all over the board.
yeah, center.
They are.
And you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to hold these positions that are based entirely based on your own assessment of the needs of that time.
Right.
And you can adjust them based on what's going on around you.
Exactly.
And in fact, it makes you a better leader to have that ability to diagnose a situation in that moment.
Right. It's not easy.
No.
It isn't, because I face this as a chairwoman, and this is what I was explaining, to the community. I might be the best leader for this district because in my own community, my own tribal nation, I represent them all, Republicans, Democrats, independents, incarcerated members, business owners, educated, but I respect their views and values.
You realize
and I listen.
They're your fellow countrymen.
Yes.
We're all
And I'm representing
Americans.
them all.
Yeah.
So it's like I have to be respectful, listen. That's the key, is to listen and be respectful.
Yeah, you would make an incredible member of Congress.
Thank you. And you are going to be an incredible vice president. Seriously, you really are. Amazing woman. Beautiful, too.
Oh, my goodness. Stop. You too.
You're very beautiful.
And you're mom of 5.
Thank you. I know. I can't believe it. I still think about that. Wow, okay. But I'm not ready to be a grandmother. I keep reminding my 30-year-old. He's not either ready to be a father, but it's like, so not ready yet. I need to have the time to enjoy grandkids.
Yeah.
I hear so many wonderful stories about being a grandparent.
Oh, yeah. Watching my mom become a grandma was the best. It was amazing. Well, thank you for your time. And I'm so excited for everyone to hear this.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.